Now the patients return to our practice. We've been calling them and checking on them, and they're still not getting good night's sleep. That was step 4, so we moved to step 5. In step 5, we're taking exactly the same appliance from step 4. We're simply going to protrude them 3 millimeters. So let's look at how that's done. When we take the obturator off of the appliance, it gives us access to our stick. The nut is actually inserted onto the stick, and we're going to have the patient place it in their mouth so that we can get a starting point for it. Okay, can you put that in for me? Okay. What we're looking for as a starting point is maximum intercuspation. So have the patient bite as if they were biting on their back teeth. Then you're going to dial the nut in until you feel it becoming flush against the appliance, which we have it at that position. So that's holding her at maximum intercuspation. For every turn that you make from side to side, that's 1/3 of a millimeter approximately. So I just made a turn of 1/3 of a millimeter, another third, another third. Those 3 turns would equal 1 millimeter worth of protrusion of her lower jaw. We want 3. Why 3? Well, it's the same 3 millimeters we used in step 3 of the protocol. So let's think our way through the last things that we've done. Step 2, a mandibular splint. All we did was open the vertical dimension, let the jaw relax where it would. Step 3, we kept exactly the same vertical dimension opening. We protruded the patient forward 3 millimeters. Step 4, we're going to let the jaw fall back again and double the vertical dimension. And in step 5, we're keeping the doubled vertical dimension and moving forward 3 millimeters. So step 2 and step 4 are identical to one another in jaw position. Step 3 and step 5 are identical in jaw position as well. Each step of the way, if a person says, now I'm better, we know the one thing that was changed in that step that might have caused that to have occurred. So I've moved her forward 1 millimeter. There's 1, 2, 3 turns again. That's another millimeter. And 1, 2, 3 turns. That's 1/3 millimeters. That's 3 millimeters worth of protrusion on this particular appliance. So the patient still has the ability to move her jaw around. She can move side to side. She can move forward. What she can't do is move back past that 3 millimeter point. Now, what do we have? We still have no way of blocking airflow here. So the obturator is still important at this step. So you're going to have her put that back in place when she inserts it and goes home. Now, there's one big difference that happens at step 5, and that is we've opened the vertical dimension and we're moving her forward 3 millimeters. There may be an opportunity for a patient to feel like when they wake up in the morning after being in that position all night long, that they can't quite get their bite back in position. We want to assist them with an aligner every morning or a training aid to find their bite. And so we're going to make for them an AM aligner. So let me take that out so I can get the obturator for you. Lower first, then the upper. I'll add the obturator. So you can see the protrusion that we've done with this screw. You can also look on the rod. It has millimeter measurements. So that's another way of making sure that you're on track with the amount of protrusion that you've done. The obturator is added, and remember, there are arrows showing the direction that it should be inserted. It inserts on, and now you're ready to send this home with the patient. Now we're going to make an AM aligner for the patient. The AM aligner is thermoplastic material, looks very similar to the beads that we used, and it needs to be heated in order to put in the mouth. But because they've shaped it in this form, it actually takes a little longer to heat up, and it's not quite as pliable as the beads. Many people actually use the beads, ball them up, and create the same appliance I'm about to show you. In its original form, it was intended to go all the way around the arch. But I find that a better way for people to secure their bite every morning is to be able to feel their back teeth come into contact. So what we're going to do is actually cut a wedge out of the front of this. And when we heat that up and put it around from canine to canine, then the back teeth can make contact and the patient will actually feel the sensation of their bite returning. So now that we've marked the AM aligner, we need to cut through those pieces. Now, I prefer to use a scalpel blade or a Bard Parker blade, a 25 works, and you can start working your way through. But for many people, the force required is rather difficult, so you can actually warm this in advance. Putting hot water in your bowl again. You can place the AM aligner inside of the hot water. Let it get softer before you actually make those cuts. Once you take it out of the water, make sure you use a sharp scalpel blade and push only towards the tabletop when you make the cut. Sometimes you'll actually only get about halfway through with the first cut. It won't go completely through. A nice technique there is actually to bend the AM aligner. It will create a groove on the back of the aligner to give you the position that you need to make the reciprocal cut. And now you have the piece that you need. Throw that piece into hot water. Give it some extra time because it does take some time to soften enough for the patient to actually mold it around their lower teeth. All right, when the material is softened, you want to mold it around the lower anterior teeth. Then have the patient bite into their maximum intercuspation bite, fold their lip over, have them squeeze tight till the back teeth touch. Hold until it sets. The other thing that happens here is the material on the lingual tends to want to flare up. And so you want to have them pushing down with that. The exception would be if they have an orthodontic wire back there. You don't want to get it locked under the wire, but just have some pressure on the tongue to keep it from flaring up as it begins to cool. Once the material is set and she opens slightly, you can see the indentations or the indexing of the anterior teeth, and as she bites down, her back teeth are in occlusion. In the morning, open, bite a little protruded for me. She'll maybe have a bite like this and she squeezes in place until finally her back teeth are in contact. We have an AM aligner sheet that your doctor will have given you, goes over the instructions as to how to utilize it in your practice.
We just demonstrated the creation of the Step 5 provisional oral appliance. It's working at double the vertical dimension from Step 2, and it's protruding 3 millimeters, just like in Step 3. Remember always to remind the patient that because the stick is coming through their mouth, they need to use the cover to drive air through the nose rather than having them breathe through the mouth all the time. Now, at the end of Step 5, you call them in a few days, and you're going to get a couple of different reactions. First reaction is, I really kind of like this, in which case we give them another 7 days. At the end of 7 days, you call them again and they still are liking it. Then we screen them again, same device you used before. If you get positive responses from both the objective and subjective recordings that you've made, then that becomes your control strategy. You go to your doctor, tell them that Step 5 is where this patient seems to be getting better. What type of appliance would you like me to make? Now, the doctor has multiple types of choices that they can make. They can make a monoblock type of appliance. They can make an orthodontic appliance, or in fact, many of what we call sleep appliances would work at this point as well. They would require you to involve a physician with a sleep study and a letter of medical necessity, though, at this point. Now, if the control strategy is Step 5, what is that telling your doctor? How are they going to use that information? Once again, it means that they need big oral volume changes and they need some assistance to get the tongue out of the airway. If you get to Step 5, the thought is that we're doing bigger orthodontics, orthognathics, and in fact involving an ENT to alter anatomy in many of these cases. You're almost always going to have a myofunctional therapist involved in order to retrain the structures after they've been moved. And the idea of doing it simply from a restorative dentistry perspective is probably out of the question by this point. Although restorative dentists will play a major role because teeth, once they're placed in the proper location, have to be contoured ideally to actually create the aesthetics and function that we're after. Now don't forget there's also nutrition, weight loss, all those other options available. So your doctor's going to go through a plethora of different alternatives for this particular patient in trying to come up with a final strategy. Well, what if you go through step 5 and you call the patient in 2 or 3 days and they say, I still got the problems. It's not getting any better. What do you do then? You move to step 6.